Welcome, 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 everyone. Welcome. We are live coming to you. This is Off Ball Takes. If you guys are new here, we're a basketball podcast, just two guys talking about hoops. And right now we're covering the playoffs, and I mean, it's been a wild ride so far. What have you thought of the playoffs so far? Because I've thoroughly enjoyed all the games, and we mentioned it on the last episode. We've really enjoyed most of these games, and we've thought they've, you know, been pretty competitive, pretty good. Some great series. We've only had, I think, one elimination or two now after tonight. So we're getting into some. We're about to be getting into the deeper round, so it's gonna heat up even more. So I'm really hyped for this. But so far, what have your thoughts been on the playoffs overall?
I mean, they've been really incredible, I think, over the course of the first round. I mean, you know, um, obviously we knew that the Western Conference playoffs first round series were going to be terrific, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, Kings Warriors, Lakers Grizzlies, but then even like some of the other peripheral series, right? Like say Denver, Minnesota. I don't think people thought that was going to be as good of a series, and even
Right.
though I mean Denver won in five. I mean, I think that a number of those games did go down to the wire, and they were pretty interesting. But then you look at the Eastern Conference, right? There were some series that, they've been also pretty good as well. I mean, but also particularly because they've gone a little bit differently, right? We talked about like the Hawks Celtics series and how that was probably going to be a really quick series, but now it's going six,
Right.
at least. And then obviously you have like the Heat Bucks where, we'll probably, maybe get into that a little bit later, right? But of course, that's a series where we didn't expect that to happen at all 3-1.
Exactly.
Obviously, kind of, getting back to that, right? A big factor of the playoffs, unfortunately, has been you've had a lot of injuries, right? Injuries to a lot of key stars, right? Giannis,
Yeah.
Joel Embiid, even guys like say, Ja and De'Aaron Fox, right? Where
Kawhi.
even though these guys have been playing, right? They're, going to be playing. They've been playing through injuries. Even guys like LeBron and AD are playing through injuries. Of course, you look at the Clippers, right? No Kawhi, no
No
Paul
Kawhi.
George.
Nope.
Exactly. So that's something that kind of sucks. But overall, the games, in terms of the quality of all the games, have been pretty good.
Yeah.
We've gotten a lot of great basketball so far over the postseason, and it's definitely a big step up from a lot of the regular season games. Even some of the ugly games, just in general, just when you look at the effort and you look at the intensity, it's a huge step up from the regular season. It almost feels like two completely different sports.
Yeah, for sure. I know you mentioned that on our previous episode. And I thought that was a great point to bring up. There is a big difference in the postseason compared to the regular season. But I guess to kick it off with our recaps and our content for tonight's live stream, we're going to give our thoughts on all the games that happened today, and then we're going to do a little bit of a sneak peek preview at the games to come, and what our thoughts are going to be on those outcomes and whatnot. But to start it off, we've got Atlanta versus Boston. And in this one, Atlanta came away with the win. They came away 119-117. And I was watching this game, and it honestly surprised me because multiple times I've reiterated on the podcast, I've thought that the Hawks weren't going to win a single game against the Celtics, but Trae Young has been completely in his bag, and showing why he's such a great player. But at the same time, if you're a Celtics fan, you might have to be worried because Trae Young just put up 38 points, 13 assists, and 4 rebounds in 44 minutes, and synced a game winner. That's a big deal, I think. And at the end of the day, I think this is probably going to boost Trae Young's trade value potentially, or whatever. He's going to probably have leverage in this, I think, depending on how well he does in this series. And I think he's played fairly well thus far. Definitely bounced back from the earlier games, but to move on, down the list, you have John Collins, who had somewhat of a bounce back game, 22 points, 2 rebounds. Previously he wasn't really a factor, unfortunately. And John Collins is one of our guys on this podcast, so we always show love to him when he hoops. But it's great to see that he's kind of getting back in the groove of things. And you had Bogey, he had a smooth 18 points off the bench. Was he off the bench? I think so, right?
He started in place
Oh,
of
he started.
DeJounte
Okay.
Murray.
Yeah. Right. I forgot DeJounte Murray had a whole situation, but Bogey started this game, and he had 18 points, very solid, 5 assists, 6 rebounds. That's what you want to see. But I think with this Trae Young performance, that's what's going to get them potentially over the line. I'm not saying that Atlanta is going to win this series, but I think the Hawks definitely needed this. Yeah, exactly, Vish. the Hawks definitely needed this. This is one that the Hawks needed to come away with. If they even want to continue to contend, but we'll see because they have a lot of question marks. What were your thoughts, on the Hawks? Then we'll get in on the Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really incredible performance by Trae Young. I mean, I didn't even think the Hawks were necessarily going to be in a position to win this game. No DeJounte Murray, right? He's been their second best player.
Yeah.
So obviously that hurts. But like you said, he kind of put the team on his back. Right. He played really well down the stretch. There was a number I think that they mentioned in the game where they said he was blocked 7 times over the course of the game.
Yeah.
Just the fact that regardless of all that, he still bounced back, right, and hit big shot after big shot. I mean, huge shout out to him. Right, Mark Stein had a rumor earlier today that I saw where they really said that there wasn't really a lot of trade interest for Trae Young,
Okay.
particularly because a lot of teams feel like he's a defensive liability, which I do understand. So that's kind of interesting. It feels like that's almost kind of code word for yeah, we think his contract is a little bit too high, so we don't necessarily want to trade for him. Right. So because I mean he's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I want to say it's about what 4 or 5 years, 215 million.
Yeah. It's a
So
max
I
deal.
mean,
It's pretty big.
yeah, I guess you could argue he's boosted his trade value, but I just think in general, I don't really think he's going anywhere because
Okay.
I don't know, how many teams would really be that interested because when you look at a lot of the top teams, right? I mean, they don't need a point guard, right? And then when you look at some of the bad teams, I mean, if he wants out of Atlanta, because that was kind of a rumor that was suggested earlier in the season where he might be the next star to ask out.
Yeah.
But if he asked out of Atlanta, I don't think he would want to go to another bad team. But
Exactly.
like you said, this was a game where Trae Young had to put the team on his back because no DeJounte Murray. You knew the ball was going to be in his hands a ton. Um, so obviously you needed a huge game from him, and you needed a decent game from a lot of the other supporting casts.
Yeah.
Again, like you said, John Collins, DeAndre Hunter hit some big shots. Bogdanovich. You got a couple guys off the bench, Okongwu, Sadiq Bey. But to kind of get into the Celtics a little bit, this also kind of felt like they sort of just gave the game away because there
Exactly.
were a lot of stretches. Yeah, if you wanted to trade, he'd have to go to a worse team. Yeah,
That's a good
that's the
point. Yeah.
difficult. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. That's the difficulty I think in terms of moving him because if you're Atlanta, you also have to kind of decide what you want in return, and is that acceptable enough to even move him?
Right.
That's the other part. But it felt like the Celtics really just gave the game away. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you got to give credit to the Hawks because they had some big shots, but I mean, Boston had so many turnovers towards the end of the game, and this was a problem for them last season. Where there were a long stretches like over the course of a lot of different games where they just couldn't stop turning the ball over, and obviously when you don't have like a traditional table setter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes that's going to happen. They don't really have any elite ball handlers, right? Like Jaylen Brown and Tatum are good ball handlers, but sometimes Brown can be kind of loose with his dribble, right? Tatum obviously is a good ball handler, but still, I wouldn't necessarily put him in the class of elite ball handlers. And they just made a lot of mistakes down the stretch. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still think Boston is going to win the series, but I mean, this is not a great look if you're Boston. I mean, because
Yeah.
you're kind of in a position where it's like Milwaukee's down 3-1. I mean, I guess Milwaukee could come back, but it's going to be very difficult. And so Boston almost kind of by default, feels like they're the team that should be coming out, but you got to take care of Atlanta. I mean, it almost kind of felt like they went into this game kind of looking ahead to Philly. And it kind of just showed in the fourth quarter because
Right.
they were awful in the fourth. Just too many mistakes down the stretch. Couldn't get stops. It was just bad. I
Yeah.
mean, it was all bad, for Boston. And I mean, you should have a bounce back game, but I mean, not ideal to go into Atlanta to try to win a game 6. They should win it,
Yeah.
but not great.
Alias
Yeah.
Demon said, "What team's gonna spawn in the finals?" Kristen Yarbs. Do you want to go with? You want to take that first, or do you want me to take it?
I don't know, because see, here's the problem, right? So going into the playoffs, I thought Milwaukee was going to make the finals in the East, and I actually kind of believed that the Warriors could kind of get it together and sort of make a run to come out
Right.
of the Western Conference. But the problem is that like kind of like what Vish said with Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you have to factor in Giannis's injury, but it still feels like they should beat Miami even without Giannis. Like I know that's kind of a tough ask to beat a team without your best player, but I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. Middleton had a really good game 1, but the last couple of games he just hasn't looked quite like himself. And that's kind of the factor that you had to kind of buy into if you hoped Milwaukee could get to the finals is Middleton would have to kind of get back to his normal self. That hasn't really happened. Um, and then obviously, like I said, out in the Western Conference, the West was so crazy. It was so hard to figure out. I still believe that Golden State could make a run to get back to the finals.
Okay.
Obviously, they're in a dogfight against Sacramento right now, but still, regardless, I mean, I don't know. It's just really tough to figure out at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
we're just gonna have to see because again, injuries have been a factor for a lot of these series. Right? It's a factor for Milwaukee, right? But at the same time, if you're Milwaukee, I mean, they shouldn't have lost that last game. I mean,
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler went crazy at 56 points, right? A terrific playoff performance. But I mean, Milwaukee was up 15 going into that fourth quarter. I mean,
Yeah.
and it for most of the game, they were kind of exposing some of the flaws with Miami in terms of the lack of size, lack of rim protection, other than Bam. But I mean, it just felt like Milwaukee melted down in that fourth quarter. I mean, just again, mistake after mistake. Yeah, without that, the series may look different. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of been the key with that Miami Milwaukee series is that without Giannis being at 100%, right? Jimmy Butler's got to be the best player on the floor, and if you got the best player, you usually have a chance to win those games. And I mean, that's kind of been the difference, right? If Jimmy Butler's going to be the best player on the floor, demonstrably the best player on the floor, right? It's gonna be pretty tough to lose a series like that if you're
Yeah.
Milwaukee or
And
if you're Miami.
and for me, like, I had the Suns going to the finals. So I think that still stands for me. I think the Suns are going to the finals coming out of the West. For the East, I think that's a harder decision for me.
Yeah,
I
and that was
initially,
initially
and
what it
yeah,
felt like.
exactly.
You knew.
Initially, I had the Bucks going all the way, but now I mean they're in danger because Jimmy is a different animal in the playoffs. And that was my dark horse on a previous episode. I definitely stated that. So I can't be too mad if the Bucks go out, but yeah, I have no clue who could come out like from the East.
I mean, I feel like it should be Boston.
It should be. At this point, it really should be. If Milwaukee gets eliminated, it should be Boston, and that's a good point. If the Celtics had a traditional point guard, they would be OP. Somebody like Rondo, I feel like somebody on that kind of level, like a two-way guy who could really facilitate strong. But I don't know, like that. That's just my opinion. I'm not even I'm not even close to a Celtics fan. I hate them actually, but. I think they could definitely come out of the East if they just need to get past Atlanta, and it seems like they're kind of struggling, but it could be that they just got complacent.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, there are no perfect teams right now because, even Phoenix, when they made the moves at the deadline, it kind of felt like they might be the prohibitive favorites. But then when you watch them play, even though they've been beating the Clippers, right, then you look at it and no Kawhi, no Paul George, they're still winning.
Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't feel like they're as dominant as you would have, liked to see out of them. So I think it's going to be really tough to predict, who's going to come out. They got to learn how to control touches. Yeah, it
Doesn't
does
look
feel
like they know what they're doing sometimes.
Yeah, and again, that was kind of the issue with them going into the playoffs. Is going into the playoffs, they only played like 8 games together.
Exactly.
So it's like that's the main issue, where continuity is really a factor. Where you have to play a number of games together. I mean, you look at a team like, say, the Sacramento Kings, right, where they had a stretch where the entire season, right up until the last game or whatever, right, they hadn't really had any real injuries happen to them. I mean, I know De'Aaron Fox is going to play, but they've pretty much that starting five has pretty much played just about every game this season. And
Yeah.
that's stuff like continuity is a factor, right? You look at a team like the Warriors, even though they had injuries this season, right? Most of their guys have been playing together for years. And I think stuff like that is going to be, a huge advantage for, those teams, right? Because just, for Phoenix, right? Late in games, they haven't been in a lot of those type of situations yet, even though they have a number of guys, right, that are big time players, right? And you just kind of assume that, down the stretch, they're just going to take over games. But,
Exactly.
Still, who knows? I think it's probably not going to be until, team cohesion, playoff
Exactly.
experience. Yeah, that was kind of the reason why I thought they were probably
Their
gonna
season.
come out of the West. Yeah, but exactly. But again, no team is perfect right now. Every team's got flaws, right? It's not a scenario where we had, have a super team like we had in the past. So
Yeah.
I don't think we're really gonna figure out like, it's probably gonna take until like the conference finals before we even really get a real sense. Because I mean, usually you can kind of see early on who the best teams are.
Mm-hmm. It's competitive,
'Cause
man.
yeah, exactly. Because like say last season, right? It felt like early on, right? Golden State, Phoenix, because even in the regular season, right? I think before Draymond and Steph got hurt, they were right there with Phoenix in terms of the best record, right? And
Yes.
then just in general, you can kind of get a sense early on, who the best teams are, right? But it just doesn't feel like that this season because it feels like every time we kind of feel like we have a sense of who's actually on top. Then after that, then it's like you just don't know, right? Because there have been times where like everybody wrote certain teams off, and then after 2 weeks, right, then they come back, right? I mean, we wrote Miami off. We wrote Miami off after that disastrous play and loss against the Atlanta Hawks,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden they have that big win against the Bulls, and even that game was really close. And then all of a sudden now they're up 3-1 on the number one seed, team with the best
Exactly.
record in the league.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got to factor in Giannis's injury, but still.
Yeah.
And I mean, even Miami has Tyler Hero. Obviously, that's not the same as Giannis.
It's still a big
Um,
deal though.
exactly. Yeah. Sorry to disagree with Reggie Miller, but
Yeah. Yeah, that was hilarious.
yeah.
Um,
But
what the?
you want me to take the
No
next game?
shot. This is delusional. Hang on. Lakers
What's
are
up?
coming out of the West. That's just cap. That's not happening. I don't like to count out LeBron because it is LeBron, but at the same time, the Lakers have looked better. I'll give them that. Like, I just don't see them going all the way. I just don't like it. I think they're gonna make, some potential mistakes, but I could be speaking too soon. Like Vish literally just said, we don't know who's gonna make it.
We don't know
Like,
who's going to make
yeah,
it.
there's
That's
no
the
way.
because the issue is that there's no perfect team right now. I mean,
Yeah.
because again, no super team and there's no clear cut favorite. I mean, because I was looking at it, and I think Boston, I think they had the best overall net rating, I think this season, but it was only like +6, I think, or something like that. So if that's not that huge of a number if you look at previous seasons, that's pretty low.
Yeah.
So it just feels like this year it is wide open. And with all the injuries that have happened, that makes it even tougher. Because I think going into this postseason, I think everybody had Milwaukee penciled in as the favorite. Even if you didn't feel like they were the overwhelming favorite, right? I think most people were like, that's the best team. They have the
Yeah,
best
for
player in
sure.
basketball, with a deep roster, right? But now they're down 3-1, right? And if they go out, right, then who's next up, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know at this point.
Yeah.
But moving on into the next game, Denver, Minnesota, right? So that series is done.
Mm-hmm.
Denver wins. The series 4-1, 5 games, 112, 109. Led by your guy, your pick for MVP, Nikola Jokic, 28,
He's the real
12, and 7,
MVP, bro.
8 for 29, right? Obviously, Jamal Murray was great as well, 35 and 5. A lot of big buckets down the stretch. Michael Porter Jr. didn't have a great game, but
Right.
made a lot of big plays in the fourth quarter. I think he was 0 for 7 to start the game, and the only shots he made were in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Aaron Gordon, chipping in 14 points, 6 rebounds. Bruce Brown, big off the bench, 14 and 5. That was a great pickup for Denver. That was a guy that I thought in the offseason was going to make a huge difference just in terms of what he brings, just from a versatile standpoint on the defensive end. Being able to, grab a lot of rebounds for an undersized player.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just fitting great. In Denver, we talked about Phoenix, right? These two teams are going to match up in the second round.
Oh, it's
In the
gonna be a
semifinals.
movie.
Exactly. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Moving on to Minnesota, right? Towns led the way with 26 and 11. Well, not led the way, but 26 and 11, fouled out. Edwards obviously put on a show, 29, 8 and 7. Right? Kind of, making his case as the new rising star in the NBA, one of the young guys, only 21 years old. Great performance. I know this was your dark horse,
Mhm.
in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of let you kind of take it from here in terms of sort of writing a eulogy for Minnesota.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah. For Minnesota, I think, the future is up in the air for them. I didn't get to watch this game. It was on NBA TV. I don't have that FYI, but yeah, so I can't really speak on what happened this game, but as from a, series standpoint, the only bright spot I can really say is, Anthony Edwards, Yeah, Ant is definitely better than Towns at this point. I think Ant is the guy.
We've been talking about that for most of this podcast
Yeah.
run, where we thought that Edwards is the guy. He's the best
Yeah.
player, and he's the guy that they should build around.
Yes. So I think everyone at this point except for Ant Edwards is kind of, I guess what's the word?
Expendable.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, thank you. They're expendable. I think if you really want to win and succeed, you need to put a better team around Anthony Edwards, one that can defend better. And, you know, Anthony Edwards, he does have the defensive prowess and the potential to be a really good defender. You know, if you look at his size, body, strength, athleticism, all that stuff, you know, I think he's really good. But at the end of the day, you know, Gobert and Towns, it's just not enough. And then the supporting cast is definitely not enough. You know, you have Austin Rivers, Taurean Prince. Mike Conley's okay, but, you know, we've stated multiple times on the podcast, his age is really, really killing him. You know, if this was Conley from like 5 years ago, it'd be a different story. But, you know, he's just not the same. Still solid, but just not enough. And Gobert, you know, we already have some thoughts on that trade. You know, we think it's one of the worst, if not the worst trade in recent history. It's really bad. It's going to set them back, I think, years. So, you know, they're kind of stuck in a rut, you know, and it's unfortunate because now you've got one of the better shooting guards in the league in Anthony Edwards, but you could be wasting, you know, his potential. A Towns trade could be phenomenal for the Wolves. Yeah, I think that could be, but, you know, who's going to take him? Where would he go? What could you potentially get back? And, you know, teams are very wary of trades now, I think, especially since the DeJounte Murray trade and the Gobert trade, you know, because it's like diminishing returns. You're not getting, you know, a powerful impact in return for what you just gave up, you know? So now teams are trying to set themselves up for the future. So I'm not sure what they could potentially get for Towns and where and who would really want him, you know? So I feel like you could probably keep Anthony Edwards and Towns, but something's got to go and something's got to give. I just don't know. But, you know, I think this team has some potential, but they've just got to figure some stuff out in the offseason because I have no clue what on earth they can really do outside of trading, you know, their bigger pieces except for Edwards, you know? What are your thoughts on their future?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of bleak. I mean, you know, obviously you can kind of point to, you know, missing some key guys in the rotation, right? You know, Jaden McDaniels, Nas Reed. Maybe that makes a difference. I still don't think it would be enough to beat Denver because I just think Denver's a better team. But,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of the offseason stuff, I think Towns, I mean, I think the issue with him is I think he actually would probably, you know, because Vish mentioned why do you think he's not? I honestly think he probably would be desired by
Okay.
some teams. I do think that there's probably a ceiling where you're probably not a great team if he's your best player. But I
Exactly.
think, but I do think that there are some, you know, teams, you know, that are in that lower tier, right, that are looking for some type of young guy.
It's the
You know,
defense for
like
me, though. That's what kills it for Towns for me.
yeah, no, I
Sorry.
get that, but I do think that there are some teams that could maybe talk themselves into, you know, hey, you know, we'll pick him up, you know, we'll kind of, you know, use him and he can kind of be one of our young guys, you know. I guess, you know, he's a little bit older now, but you know, he's
Right.
still relatively young going forward. But it does kind of suck because it didn't really have to be this way. You know, when
Recent
the Gobert
injury
trade,
history hurt him
yeah,
too, I think.
yeah, and you know, when the Gobert trade happened, I thought it was dumb. I didn't understand it. I thought it was one of the worst trades that I can recall.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people that I had heard, you know, other, you know, people who cover the NBA who, you know, kind of tried to defend it and, you know, kind of tried
You
to make their
can't.
case
You
for
literally
why it would
can't.
work. You know, some people acknowledge like, it probably won't work, you know, come playoff time, but it should make them better in the regular season. But I'm just like, you know, we've seen trades, you know, discussed like that in the past, right? Even say like the Russell Westbrook trade from last season, right? Where, you know, I heard people say like, it'll make them better in the regular season, but probably not come playoff time. But you got to be good in both. You
Mm-hmm.
can't be bad in the regular season or, you know, just average in the regular season and then turn it up come playoff time. Because, you know, the switch flipping thing, that's just really hard to do. I think you got to set a tone in the regular season and be good. But for the Towns thing, I don't know what specific teams could necessarily take him. But I don't know. They may not have to trade Towns. I mean, I think, you know, I just think you can't have both of those guys. I mean, you got to choose, in my opinion, between one. But at the same time, Gobert probably has less value than Towns, right? He's older. It feels like he might be a little bit on the decline. I know, you know, his numbers in this series weren't, you know, too bad, but it feels like defensively he slipped a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of tough. I mean, you know, and then for Denver, right, they're going to move on. Oh, in the chat, what do you guys think about Russ postseason so far? He's
Oh
been
yeah,
cooking.
we acknowledge that big time. You know, we put out a YouTube short. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. But you know, we basically said he's potentially revived his entire career with this postseason run. You know, he basically rewinded time and threw it back to OKC. But you know, I think he was a great, you know, addition for this. And shout out Jamal. You know, that was one of our guests that we had. You know, he said this was the perfect fit. We weren't as high on it, but you know, he was high on it from the jump. So, shout out to him. And then, unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to, beat this Phoenix team. But, we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, shout out to Russ because he has been cooking.
Yeah.
And, he definitely deserves it. It's nice to see, especially since, he was having a hard time with the fans, the media and all that stuff when he was on the Lakers. So, it's really good to see. What were your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't necessarily great tonight, but he did have those the other games, right, where he was terrific. I will say, I think part of it also is that obviously, you look at the last few games, right, where there's no Kawhi, no Paul George. So this is kind of, his opportunity, right, to have the ball in his hands,
Yeah.
control most of the offense. And I think this is probably the best type of role for him at this point is, I think you can have him I think the best role for him at this point is to probably just kind of like have his own team, right? But it's probably just kind of like an average team. Um, because again, it was fine with the Clippers, but just in general, right? Like if you want that version of Russ that you got in those other games, right? You're probably not going to be a great team
Yeah.
at this point. But I think at the very least, because there were some people who thought he was just going to be out of the league. I didn't think that was a factor at all
Yeah.
because even though he struggled on the Lakers, I still thought he can still play and still,
Contribute.
contribute. Like
Yeah.
I didn't think he wasn't an NBA player. Um, in terms of what the issue with the Lakers was, I just think it wasn't a good fit. I didn't like the trade as a Lakers fan. I didn't like the trade at the time. I didn't
Hmm.
understand it. I hoped that it would work, but I just didn't think it was gonna work because I
Bad
just don't.
spacing.
I just don't think you can have Westbrook control the ball next to LeBron when he's just, Westbrook is just not that great of an outside shooter. He shot well for the Clippers in, a couple of those games, and I think that kind of helped contribute, to the games he was having. Because you look at this game, he was 3 for 18, 1 of 6 from three. I think he was 3 for 19 in game one. I just don't think it was a good fit. I didn't like it at all. And just in general, like there were other things that you needed out of him that you just
Yeah.
weren't going to get out of him, right? Because you needed him to be really good defensively, right? And he's just not a great defender. I know he had some big plays defensively against the Suns, in the early games, but it wasn't really like that down the stretch of the series. I mean, he's just not that great a defender, and I just
Yeah.
think that, like, just in general, when you're not a great outside shooter and you're not that great of a defender, you're just not going to be able to fit alongside LeBron.
Right.
I think the AD fit was fine because he's a really good passer.
Pick and roll.
Yeah, exactly. And but obviously, then the issue with the pick and roll is that teams are going to go under all the time. Not respect the jumper. So I think
Give him
that's the
space.
problem.
Yeah.
I just didn't like the trade from the start, and I didn't understand it. I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was, but I didn't really expect it to be great because I just didn't like it. I didn't understand it. And I think it was best for both sides to move on. Right? It clearly wasn't working. It was really becoming a problem. It felt like in terms of guys not getting along. So I think this was the best thing for him in terms of going to another team, playing much better, and it's good because he showed he can still contribute to a team, and he's going to be able to still continue to play even at 34, right? Because I mean he was
Yeah.
drafted in 2008, so I mean you're talking about 15 years later, he's still playing, at a pretty solid level. I mean
Hmm.
I think at this point he's secured probably I think like a mid-level exception deal where a team probably gives him like maybe 10 million. Somewhere between like 7 to 10 million a season, maybe for
Yeah.
like 2 seasons or something like that. I think that's probably where he is. He's not a max player anymore, but he's definitely better than a minimum contract player, right?
Oh
Which is what
yeah,
he
for
did
sure.
with the Clippers. And that's the other difference, right? Because with the Lakers, you had to give up stuff in order to get Westbrook. It wasn't like you just added Westbrook to a really good team. You had to take away guys, right? You had to take away Kuzma, KCP. Those were really good fits, right? Trez. So you gave up 3 guys for a guy who, isn't a superstar, and that just wasn't going to work, right? And then you look at the Clippers, right? All they had to do was just, sign him, right? They didn't have to get rid of anybody. They didn't have to trade any significant pieces in order to get him. So, I think that's probably his best bet at this point. So
Yeah.
it's good that it's worked out, right? Because you don't want to see guys, kind of
No.
just fall out of the league, for whatever reason, right? If they're gonna go out, let it be because they're just done, right?
Right.
Not because, let's see, do y'all think media opinion, social media affected the decisions the Lakers made? Like in the sense of like, what
I
do you
think he's
mean?
talking about the Westbrook. I think he's talking about Westbrook. Um.
Oh, so like
So
what
like
was
trading him away. Trading him
oh
away.
no, I think they did that because it didn't work.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't working. And it seemed like that there was a point where, guys were, like I said, not getting along. Because in that last game, right, where LeBron broke the scoring record, I don't know how, locked in people were to kind of watching some of the stuff, but there were like stretches where it looked like there were some real problems going on.
Yeah,
Because I
especially with
mean,
like AD, Westbrook, it
yeah,
would
like
look really
Westbrook, he
rough. It
looked
was
like
some
yeah,
weird energy going on. I was
yeah, because
kind of
like
confused.
yeah, because Westbrook, he had a stretch where like he wasn't with the rest of the team, right? Where like he was kind of doing his own thing. There were stretches where like when he was on the bench, he would just be in the locker room and then he would come out.
Yeah.
There were a couple of passes where he threw some really aggressive passes. It just felt like it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of the decisions, yeah, I think they did the trade because it didn't work. Um, and just they found a deal at the deadline. That worked out great for them. Like I said, I think was just time to move on, right?
Yeah.
Like there was no way you could continue to have that go into the end of the season. And also just in general, it gives them more flexibility because if they had kept Westbrook and just let his contract run out, you couldn't have the guys that you have right now because even with Westbrook gone, you'd be over the cap. And you wouldn't, and I mean, like they would have cap space, but not enough to really make like significant
Nah.
changes. So,
Yeah.
they're in a much better position now. And I think Westbrook's in a much better position now because
Yeah.
he's playing a role that he prefers to be playing as a starter with the ball in his hands. And he's shown that he can contribute to a team.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I don't know if if he's going to contribute to like a winning team.
I think it's got to
But
be
we,
his own. I like, and sorry
yeah,
to cut you off, but I think it has to be his own because I can speak on it because he was in Washington for a brief stint, and on a team where you have multiple ball dominant players, I don't think Westbrook succeeds. And that's kind of like a weird statement to make, I know, but I think in this stage of his career, that's the case because I think when he was in OKC, with KD, I thought it was a perfect fit. There were some shooting issues, but you know, even if you look at Houston, it didn't work with James Harden. I just don't think in that sense you can't have two ball dominant people like that. Him and Beal, that didn't really, work out great. So, I didn't really expect him and Braun to work out. You know what I mean? So I feel like he's got to be on his own team, like
yeah.
you said earlier, pretty much.
Yeah, I do think leading up to the deadline, there were stretches where it looked like it worked better, but again, they still weren't winning a ton of games.
No.
So
And
just
now
in
they
general,
look better. So, and not
yeah,
to say that
exactly.
he's the problem, but it just wasn't a fit.
Yeah, it
That's just
wasn't
what
fit.
it
I'm
comes
not
down
gonna
to.
blame Westbrook, the player, as much as the decision to trade for
Yeah,
Russell Westbrook. I think that was the main
exactly.
issue. I just think it was a big mistake to make that move because I
Yeah,
mean, again, you're talking about a guy making almost $50 million and you're giving up multiple players. And it'd be one thing if it was like a superstar point guard, right? If it was like Dame Lillard or somebody like that, right? Then obviously you don't feel as bad about trading Kuz, KCP,
right.
Trez and a pick or whatever for for Lillard, right? But doing that for an older Russell Westbrook who's no
It's
longer in
different.
that tier of players, it's just different.
Yeah,
It's just different. But going back to the Denver thing, right? So obviously, they wrap up the series in 5. Some of those games, were relatively close, but obviously Denver was the better team. It's kind of interesting with Denver, right? Because even though they're the number 1 seed, it doesn't feel like anybody really believes that they're going to come out of the West.
yeah. I
Even
think they're
though they
too
got
weak.
yeah, even though they got Nikola Jokic, and they have a decent supporting cast, but I just think the issue is with Denver, um, their ceiling is just so dependent on can Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., can those guys, kind of raise their game come playoff time, right? Because if they're kind of just regular guys, right, then Denver's not going to be able to come out of the West, let
Yeah,
alone win the title, right? But if those guys, play up a level, all right, just said good night,
yeah,
chat with
man.
y'all.
Appreciate you coming through, bro. It's all love. Good questions too, dude. Like great combos. Always love talking hoops with you, man. Appreciate you
Yeah,
coming through, bro.
thanks a lot. But just going back to Denver, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if those guys can elevate their game, I think you can get, a championship caliber team. It's just tough because, again, like they do have stretches where it just feels like they don't have enough. They're playing 8 guys, right? You have your starters,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Christian Brown, and I like those guys, but I just don't know. I mean, their starting 5 is really good, but it just feels like you're relying a lot, right, on guys where I just don't know if every night they're going to give you the level of production you need in order to advance. Maybe they can beat Phoenix. I mean, the two teams are pretty even in terms of their starters. I mean, neither team I don't really feel like has depth. Obviously Denver's got, a little bit more activity. But just in general, I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like that those teams feel kind of even. I mean, the only difference is that obviously with Phoenix, right, you got Booker and Durant, and I think those guys, are they're those that duo is better than Denver's duo, right? Because obviously
Yes,
Jokic
yes,
is
yes.
awesome, and he can probably not necessarily cancel out Durant, right? But he's capable of huge nights too,
Yeah.
all over the floor. But then it's like when you look at Denver's best player, right? Who is it? Is it Jamal Murray? Is it Michael Porter Jr. is an Aaron Gordon. It would probably be Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
Um, but just in general, right? Obviously, then you have Devin Booker, right? And Devin Booker is in a very different tier from Jamal Murray. Jamal
Extremely.
Murray is very good,
Yes.
right? But Devin Booker is kind of in that tier where he's like borderline. Some people might have him in the top 10, and then some people might have him like in 11, 12, or whatever,
Yes.
right? But he's in that tier, right? Where any given night he can look like a top 10 player,
Right.
right? And obviously Durant is in, the tier where any given night he can look like the best player. So, obviously that's kind of a tall task. But then
Yeah.
again, you look at Phoenix's bench, it's not great. And it just doesn't feel great that they're in close games. Every game, against the Clippers has been relatively close. I mean, they've been able to close it out in the end, but it just doesn't feel great. And that's kind of the difficulty with figuring out who's going to come out of the West. I mean, just because it's just, we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, because every team has a case for making it out of the West, but also a pretty good case for not being able to come out of the West, right? Like
Exactly.
Denver, I don't necessarily like some of the guys coming off the bench. And even though they've been good defensively, I think there's going to be some teams where I think they're going to really struggle to defend. Like, I think they're going to really struggle to defend Phoenix because, I mean, asking Jokic in drop coverage to try to stop, Durant or Devin Booker, I think that's going to be really tough. Even though, Phoenix isn't necessarily going to punish you at the rim, the way that some other teams can. But I mean, just in general, that perimeter shooting, the shot creation, just think that's going to be tough. I mean, Phoenix doesn't take a ton of threes, whereas Denver is a pretty high volume 3-point shooting team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously a factor, but I don't know. I think that's honestly a pretty evenly matched
Yeah.
series in
I
my
also
opinion.
think and I can't remember. Sorry, I'm so tired, but I don't know if we covered the Clippers Suns game tonight. But if we didn't,
We haven't yet.
yeah, we haven't. But just to keep talking about Denver and Phoenix, I think with Phoenix, like their issue, I think against Denver is going to be on the rebounds. I think Jokic is going to get a lot of boards. Gordon's going to get a lot of boards. So I'm not sure how well Aiton's going to be able to fare against that. Because it seems like he's been struggling against Mason Plumlee, and Zubac. So I think that's where Denver's going to kill them. So like you said, it's kind of like they're mirroring each other. Both of the benches aren't very strong. So and they both heavily rely on their starter minutes. But I feel like this series could really go either way. But I got to give it to Phoenix because mainly due to the fact that they have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul. I think that's a better trio than Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. Just based off of experience. And numbers, quite frankly. Like you said, the most of the guys on Phoenix or, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are pretty high tier players, but then, you look at Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, there's a lot of question marks with those guys. So, I think it's going to come down to consistency for Denver, and for the Suns, it's got to come down to defense and, can they really peel away in these close games? Because it seems like they've been getting away with a lot of stuff, not in terms of officiating and stuff like that, but, getting away and squeezing by the Clippers, but it's not a healthy Clippers. It's a
Right.
pretty bruised and battered Clippers. Like no Paul
Yeah.
George, no Kawhi Leonard. So you would think this would be an easy task, but at the same time, it's looked rough. I'm not really impressed. And the same thing, I said the same thing about Philly. I'm not impressed with them beating Brooklyn in the way that they did because I wanted to see them take it to the next level, and it just doesn't seem like they're there yet. But with Phoenix, I would be expecting them to win by 10 plus points. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see single digit games. That's a scary sight for me, especially for my pick to go to the finals. So and I think Denver is a better team than the Clippers or than this Clippers team. So that I think that's something to keep our eyes on. Did you have anything to add to that before we cover the Clippers game?
Yeah, I just think in general, right, with Denver, I think their defense so far this postseason has been pretty strong. Um, and I think that's going to be one of the differences is because again, Phoenix just in terms of the defense, it just hasn't been, that great. Obviously, they've had, some, pretty solid games. Because again, they've won, they won in 5 games. You still got to give them credit, right? But this game was 136 to 130. And, when you look at this Clippers team, it just doesn't feel like they should be able to score 130 points.
Exactly.
Even with, again, with Russell Westbrook going 3 for 18, it just doesn't feel like that should be happening. And this isn't the first time that it was a relatively high scoring game. I mean, obviously, right, when you're going against a really good offensive team, right, it's tough to stop them. But again, a shorthanded Clippers team, that just doesn't seem great. But I still think that they can beat Denver just because, again, um, like you said, right, both teams, it's largely about their starting five. And I feel like Phoenix's starting five is probably better. It
Yes.
just comes down to, can Phoenix get stops? Because if they can't get stops, it's going to be really hard for them to win.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, Denver defensively, right? Minnesota's completely different from Phoenix, right? Because again, I mean, obviously Edwards is awesome. They couldn't really stop Anthony Edwards this series,
Right.
right? And Edwards is good, but Devin Booker's a better player than Anthony Edwards, and now he's a different player, right? Again, he's not going to punish you quite as much at the rim as Anthony Edwards can, but he can still get to the basket, right? He's
Yeah.
still got a lot of skill shots around the rim. But he's also going to damage you even more from the outside, right? Because he's a better shooter.
And Devin Booker has Kevin Durant too, so it's going to
Exactly.
easily take some pressure off. So I'm just concerned how Denver is going to be able to stop both of those guys at the same time. So it's kind of like they got to pick their poison. And honestly, I think at this point, just based off of what I've seen, I think the Suns are trying to find their identity in this playoff run, which is very interesting mainly due to the fact that they missed. They haven't played a lot together with their big three healthy, but I think they're going to they're trying to find their identity right now. So that's kind of concerning, but at the same time, it's very interesting because now teams have to pick their poison, because right now it seems like Devin Booker is the main guy on the team, just from what I've seen throughout this playoff run. Devin Booker had 47 tonight. So, I think you have to probably try and take Devin Booker out of the game. And I know that's crazy to say. That means, probably going to give up some more points to Durant. But I think, you've got to go with the younger guy. I'm not saying Devin Booker's better than Kevin Durant. I think it's just Booker. This is Booker's team. So I think if you take their number one option out, then you can potentially live with Durant, exploding. But I think, the key for Denver is to negate Devin Booker, and I'm not sure how they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things we talked about when the trade happened, was that it slots guys into roles that they're probably, a lot more comfortable with.
Exactly.
Right? Instead of Devin Booker being the number one option, right, who always has to be the guy that ends up getting doubled and tripled, instead you got Kevin Durant out there, right, who can take some pressure off of Devin Booker. And now Devin Booker can just, go one-on-one against guys. And, one-on-one, he's a very good scorer, one of the best, especially in terms of like when he gets hot, just one of the ultimate heat check guys.
Exactly.
From that guard spot. It's just, incredible what he can do. Even defensively, I think he's been, much better than he had been, since they've traded for Kevin Durant. I mean, his defense had been getting better in general, but it feels like, it's as good as it's been. And again, and I think part of that is due to them trading for Kevin Durant and kind of taking some pressure off of him offensively, right? Because, just when you don't have to do quite as much, or struggle as much, you can do more in other areas, right? And that's kind of been the key here. So that's that. Again, if your pick is Phoenix to come out of the West, again, obviously there's some concern considering, right, that they kind of struggled against the Clippers team that wasn't healthy. But the fact of the matter is, you can only play the team that's in front of you, right? They won the series, they're moving on, right? And so now, that's kind of the best thing you can ask for, right? Come out of the series healthy so you can be ready for the next round.
Yeah. And I guess, we kind of just recapped the game ourselves. I mean, like, it was a close game, but at the same time, the Clippers did somewhat pull off a little bit of a comeback, 20 point. They were down by 20 at one point and brought it down to 6. So, that is concerning. But, I don't really have any other thoughts on this game except for the fact that Phoenix is moving on. But at the same time, I'm not impressed. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on that game before we look, a little bit ahead at the upcoming games.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, I feel like Phoenix probably just kind of took their foot off the gas.
Sure.
Just in general, we've seen a lot of teams do that when they have big leads.
Sure.
even well, I think it was Game 3 with the Lakers, where after they were up 35-9, they just took their foot off the gas. I
Yes,
mean, I think
yes.
that's just kind of just naturally what happens when you have a big lead. Obviously, like you said, it was kind of scary that it got really close. I never felt like they were going to lose the
Right,
game.
right, right. Yeah, we
But
watched
just
it together. You said that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we watched it together, but it just, how quickly they came back was kind of concerning just because it felt like Phoenix just, couldn't really stop anybody.
Yes.
But, regardless, again, you got to give credit to the Clippers. They played hard. They were obviously very shorthanded. I obviously if they had Kawhi and Paul George, I mean, it's a different story. Maybe they beat Phoenix, but again, that's kind of the issue with, this team in general, right? Is the fact that those guys, you have to rely on those two guys to be healthy, and they're never healthy.
Yes.
And for Kawhi, it's actually, it's worse because, he's not going to play unless he's basically 100%, right? And again, not to necessarily pick on him, because he's a great player, but you look at some of these other teams where they got guys, that are clearly playing through injuries, clearly not 100%, right? And he's not out there. And, it's just it's an unfortunate, scenario situation to be put in if you're the Clippers because, again, I just don't know how you can really build around, two guys that are never healthy. And one of those guys you have to load manage and he just never plays. I
Yeah,
mean,
I get it.
and you don't even know when he's gonna play. That's
It's
the difficult part
frustrating.
too.
Yes, I get that 100%. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess looking ahead, we've got literally 3 teams facing elimination. And that's tomorrow. Well, technically later today, depending on how you want to look at it. But I guess we should start with the first game that's going to be on. And that's the New York Knicks at Cleveland. Knicks are up 3-1 against Cleveland, and Cleveland has looked terrible. Unfortunately, we were pretty high on Cleveland coming into the playoffs, but now it's just looking like our pick has completely backfired, and we may have underestimated the Knicks. So, do you think the Knicks are going to send or keep Cleveland at home, or do you think Cleveland's going to live to fight another day? Because I don't think Cleveland's going to live. I think the Knicks are probably going to keep them home.
Um, I mean, Cleveland in general has been great at home this season. I think they were 31-10, but the Knicks have
Yes.
been a very good road team.
Mm-hmm.
And that should factor in come playoff time. I mean, elimination games are really difficult. I mean, we just saw, right, the Celtics, were initially putting away the Hawks, and then the Hawks came all the way back, right? Again, playing with your food. So I think it's possible that Cleveland can win, but I still think the series is over at this point. It just feels like the Knicks at this point. I think we were probably wrong and that, the Knicks are the better team.
Yeah.
We did talk about it in the sense of the lack of wings for Cleveland was going to hurt them at some point. We just didn't know when, but it hurt them in the first round, right? RJ Barrett has popped off the last few games. And when he gets it going, Cleveland doesn't really have an answer for him. Again, Karis LeVert, not really a wing, more like a guard.
Mm-hmm.
He's played fine the last few games, but, then Isaac Okoro off the bench. And again, not having a backup big to be able to match, the Knicks guys off the bench like Obi Toppin, Isaiah Hartenstein. It just feels like the Knicks have more guys that they can, kind of trust and rely on.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't shock me if, the Knicks won, right? Just because I feel like they're better. But I think Cleveland still has a chance to win this specific game.
Okay.
But I don't think they're going to win the series. Only because
Okay.
they're at home. It's a desperation game. So it wouldn't surprise me if they won. But I still think the Knicks are going away with this series.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're going away with this series, but I think it's going to end, tomorrow. So that's the only way I can really look at it. And I guess the next game would be your Lakers versus the Grizzlies. This is a big deal because LA's up 3-1. I don't think that was the expectation at all. I think people thought this series was going to be a lot closer, but I have some things to say about this. The last game that they played, I think it was one of the worst officiated games that I've ever seen in the playoffs. I think LA got away with way too much. I know you're going to disagree with me because, Lakers fan, obviously. But, I think LA got away with way too much. Ja was getting hacked at the rim, but, complete no calls. I think that's complete BS if you ask me. But, Memphis did sell this game. You have to acknowledge that. But at the same time, if you look at the officiating, I think this game would have gone completely different. But, facing elimination, I don't think this team really has what it takes to step up, but, they are at home. But at the same time, the Lakers have also stolen one at home. So, it would not surprise me if LA just came out and kept them at home as well. But, at the same time, you have to look at it from Memphis's POV. Like you said, desperation game. Who knows who could pop off, The coach is probably rallying the team, saying we can't let them do this in our house. All that, the cliches, how it goes. So, this is a tough one to call, but I think LA is probably going to win this one. I think Bron is too locked in. He took what Dylan Brooks said personally. I'm not going to say he's going off for 40, obviously, but he's going to play a key factor and probably, put this one away. What do you think about this?
Actually think for this one game, I think Memphis has a pretty good chance of winning just because they're, at home. They've been
Yes.
great at home. I know they lost, to the Lakers in game one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, I just think just in general, it's a desperation game. Closeout games are hard. It feels like the Lakers a lot of times, after wins, they tend to kind of take their foot off the gas.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Memphis kind of came out with some energy and took care of business. I still think the series is pretty much done at this point, but I do think Memphis has a good chance of winning Game 5. But when it either way, I think if they go back to LA, I think it ends there.
Yeah.
Just in general, just because again, I just think at home desperation, right? That's usually the team with more desperation tends to win. And so I think for one game, I'm gonna give it to Memphis, but I do think after that, I think it's done.
Yeah. Okay. I can get down with that. Now I guess moving on into the Heat Bucks. This is another potential elimination game. Milwaukee's facing elimination against Miami. Miami's up 3-1 in the series. Definitely a surprise for a lot of people. And like I mentioned, they were my dark horse, so I have somewhat of a belief in them. But I think right here, at home, I think Milwaukee's going to come out and defend home court on this one. I think Giannis is probably going to pop off. And to Miami's credit, they did do a good job at stopping Giannis. But at the same time, Giannis didn't look 100%. I think everybody who watched that game can agree with that. There was just times when he was just throwing the ball up, and that's a little uncharacteristic for me or for him. So I have to pick the Milwaukee Bucks. I think Giannis is going to have a bounce-back game, and I think they'll live to fight another day. And I think Milwaukee's probably going to come out of this series, but it would not surprise me if my dark horse, came out and really eliminated them, especially with Jimmy Butler, the way he's been playing. Because shout out to him. He had a historic performance, crazy. Yeah, and he's been hooping on a different level, playoff Jimmy for a reason. So, what are your thoughts on this one? Because it's a tough call, but I'm going Milwaukee.
I think I agree with you.
Okay.
Because I feel like Milwaukee, even though Jimmy Butler was great down the stretch, I feel like Milwaukee gave that game away.
Yeah.
They had a 15-point lead going into the fourth quarter, and they just completely collapsed down the stretch. Obviously, again, you got to give credit to Miami because Butler was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lot of guys like Caleb Martin hit big shots. Kyle Lowry made a couple plays. But I do think Milwaukee will bounce back and win at home. As for the series, it's a really tough call because, again, it's just they're down 3-1. Only I think 13 teams have come back, and won a series being down 3-1. Obviously, this is a different scenario because I think with Giannis, the Bucks are the better team.
Yes.
And they do have home court advantage, right, which also is a factor, right, because they're going to have Game 5 at home, and they're going to have Game 7 at home.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge factor. So I think that they can win the series, right? I don't think this is your typical 3-1 deficit, but it's also just really hard because they got to win 3 straight games. And that's always just very hard to do, And again, like you said, Giannis, you watch him, he was great. I thought for large portions of the game, but it felt like down the stretch of the game, you could just tell he wasn't 100%.
That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think if he's not 100%, like if he's hobbled, it's going to be really hard. Because you're just going to have to hope that Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday play really well.
Exactly.
Middleton started the series off in Game 1 really well, but he just hasn't looked the same as of late. And if he's just not where he needs to be, it's going to be really hard. I kind of agree with you. I feel like Milwaukee should win the series, but I don't know. That one's just really tough to call.
Yeah.
Because I just think Miami is up 3-1. You don't typically blow 3-1 leads.
I get that.
And just in general, I mean, if Giannis is not going to be, because again, Middleton isn't necessarily where he needs to be. Giannis isn't necessarily where he needs to be. And if both of those guys are really hobbled, I don't know. Miami could potentially pull off the upset. It's just going to kind of come down to Jimmy Butler's going to have to continue his level of play because that's been the other difference, right? Jimmy Butler's been clearly the best player on the floor, and that has to continue in order for Miami to win, right? If Giannis all of a sudden, kind of figures things out, and all of a sudden he becomes the best player on the floor, Milwaukee's going to win. But, we're just going to have to see because that's kind of the thing is Giannis physically, does he get better over the course of the series, or is this kind of just an injury where he just kind of has to play through it?
Right.
Because if that's the case, I don't know. This one's a close call because I feel like Milwaukee can come back and win this series, but the odds are really against them because again, you look at every single playoff series over the course of the history of the NBA, right? Only 13 teams I think have done it, right? I can't remember every single team, but we know Denver did it twice.
Yes. Yes.
In one playoff series, we know Golden State did it.
Mm-hmm.
We know Cleveland did it. But I mean, again, just in general, right? Like, I don't know. And also, it comes down to the 3-point shooting because that's the crazy thing about Miami is that they were the worst offensive team in the league
Yeah.
during the regular season, but that's completely flipped so far this postseason, where their offense has actually been pretty good. Even again without Tyler Hero, right, who's one of their go-to options on offense. I mean, Jimmy Butler's basically just put the team on his back. So
Yes.
again, I do think Milwaukee will win this next game though. At home, desperation. Giannis hopefully physically is a little bit better. After a couple days rest, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. Um. So I guess moving on into the next one, this isn't an elimination one, but the stakes are just as high. I feel like this is Golden State at Sacramento, so we're gonna have a Warriors road game where they have been abysmal on the road this season, and that's continued in the playoffs. They've lost 2 away against the Kings. And we have the Warriors winning this series in general. And I think they'll probably win this game. I think this is what's going to happen. I think Fox is dealing with something, right? I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, so he's going to be, a little hindered. I'm not sure how much it's going to bother him, but I think it'll. I'm not sure what hand it's affecting, but it's his shooting hand.
Yeah.
Oof, yeah. So that may potentially affect him, but like I said, the Warriors are pretty bad on the road, so it wouldn't surprise me if they completely drop this game. But I'm gonna pick them to win this next game and still have them winning the series. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think with the Fox injury, I think it's going to be really tough
Yeah,
for Sacramento to win. Obviously, in order for the Warriors to win this series, they're going to have to win a game in Sacramento. So they're either
right.
going to have to win this game, or if they lose this game, they're going to have to win Game 7 in Sacramento. Um, so I don't know. I mean, again, with a hobbled De'Aaron Fox, I mean, he's going to play through his injury, but again, with an injury to your shooting hand, you're going to have a splint, right? And he's been shooting the ball, relatively well, right? If his 3-point shooting kind of drops off and all he can really do is get to the basket, I think that's going to be really tough because,
Yes.
he's had some outlier shooting games that has kind of helped, Sacramento, right? Because in the first game, I think he was 4 of 8 from three. And in the last game, he shot pretty well from three, even though they lost by a point, right? And that's kind of the other factor because that last game was a pretty crippling loss for Sacramento,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because Sacramento had a lot of opportunities to win that game, but they just kept giving it away. And then Golden State, right, almost gave the game to Sacramento too. And I just don't think that's going to happen 2 games in a row. It wouldn't surprise me if the Warriors kind of just ran away with this game. I
Okay.
think it's just going to kind of come down to can Fox still play at a high level with this injury? Because
Yeah.
if he can't and he's like just compromised by it, I just don't think the Kings have much of a chance, right? Golden State has done a really good job defensively with Sabonis. They've done a much better job of being able to attack the basket, right, which is Sacramento's weak point defensively. So I think the Warriors are going to win this game, and in order for
Okay.
them to win the series, they're going to have to win this game. I think because I think it's going to be really tough for them to lose this game and then still win the series. Obviously, they can win Game 6, but I mean, Game 7 in Sacramento, that's kind of that's going to be really difficult to pull off
Yeah.
with as bad as they've been on the road.
For
So
sure.
and again, they're not. They're 11-30, right? But 11-30 in fairness is not 0-41. So
Yeah.
all you have to do is win one road game, and then take care of business at home, and you can win these series.
And I sorry to cut you off. I don't know if you had anything more to say, but with this Warriors team, with their backs against the wall, I think I trust them a lot, and that's why this is a must win for them. I think. So that's why I think they're gonna get it done here in Sacramento tonight or tomorrow night. But we'll see what happens. It's a 10 p.m. game. So yeah, it'll be interesting. So I'm really hyped for this one, and I think a lot of people are. I think this is the matchup that a lot of people have their eyes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw it said there were 10 million people who viewed the last Warriors Kings
That's
game, and I think
crazy,
that was
bro.
the most watched first round game. I want to say I think it might have. I think it said 20 years.
Dang,
Um,
that's crazy.
yeah, exactly. And when you consider like the decline in in cable viewership. I I mean, that's really good.
That's a great sign.
That's close to, some finals viewership games. I mean, in the
Hmm.
last few years. I mean, that's, so for a first round series, I mean, it's been the best one. It's lived up to the billing. It's been
Yes.
great. It just sucks that De'Aaron Fox is hurt. Um, it's unfortunate, right? We've had a lot of injuries this postseason. And it just sucks that we have another one. At the very least, he's going to be able to play.
You're right.
But, obviously, whoever wins this series, right? If the Warriors go on to win the series, right? Obviously, you're going to have people, point to the De'Aaron Fox thing as a factor. But again, just in general, injuries are always a factor every postseason. And that's, in my opinion, that's kind of why I just don't normally like the idea of putting asterisks on titles. Because I just think in general, you could kind of point out just about any championship team had something go their way, right? That, where luck factors in. I mean, you need
Yes.
luck in order to win a title. You need luck to win playoff series, right? And whether or not that's, guys getting hurt, which, I don't want to say is good luck because it's not good when guys get hurt,
Right.
right? Or sometimes,
But it's in
maybe,
favor of a different team, of the other
yeah,
team. Yeah, I
yeah,
get you.
exactly, right? Sometimes lucky shots go in, maybe calls go in your way. Just maybe guys just making mistakes down the stretch, just in general, right? I mean, luck plays a huge factor. And, unfortunately, some of these teams have just had really bad luck, right? The Clippers, right? To have both of their top guys go out and not be
Yeah.
available pretty much for most of that series. I mean, that's pretty tough. I mean, so just in general, right? Like that's the thing that kind of sucks about a lot of these series, in some of these games. But either way, the Warriors King one I think has been easily the best first round series.
For
Just
sure.
every game's, game three I guess wasn't so much, but right, but all the other games were relatively close down to the wire. You had two games that were literally down to one shot where, if a shot goes in, right, then it completely changed that game, right? Wiggins makes that three in game one. Warriors probably win that one, right? Harrison Barnes makes the three in game four, right? The Kings go up 3-1 and that series is probably over. So
Yeah.
that's been to me, the peak series,
Yeah.
just in terms of just how back and forth it's been, and how impressive Sacramento has looked. Even if they lose this series, and again, I said this going into the postseason, even if Sacramento loses in the first round, there's nothing negative they can take away. I think, obviously they'd be disappointed to lose, but again, it's the first time you made the playoffs in 20 years. Nobody believed in you. Even when the season, started and they, were kind of getting on a roll early on. Um, so, I mean, if you're Sacramento, you hold your head high regardless of what happens.
Yes. I think that's all facts. And then moving on to, fast forwarding, the farthest that we can go right now. This would be Thursday's game, Boston at Atlanta. This is an interesting one because, Boston or Atlanta is facing elimination, and Atlanta can also tie it up here. And what's funny is a while ago, like I think it was even before the playoffs started, I said that the Celtics could possibly go out in the first round. But I'm not sure. Atlanta. Recently they played well, but like you said, I think this is just a case where they may have gotten just a little bit too complacent. Boston, that is obviously, but I think Boston's probably going to take Atlanta out on Thursday. I know it's at home. Atlanta's at home, but at the same time, I think Boston's stolen one game at home, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a possibility. It could really go either way, but I think Boston's going to come out with this one. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this series probably ends on Thursday. I mean, if you're Boston, you have to win this game. I'm not saying that they're going to lose game 7. If it gets to a game 7, but just in general, it would not be a good look,
Yeah,
to lose back-to-back games against Atlanta, and especially, you lost one where they were without one of their best players. Um, so they need to close out this series, right? Because if they win, they're going to go against Philly. Philly's going to be pretty well rested.
yeah,
And the longer this series goes, the more fatigued they're going to be. And you don't want to be fatigued going against, Philly. Because again, Philly's a good team, even though I think Boston is better, right? But, you don't want to hang around and, just let a team hang around. Because again, you could mess around, and it's game 7 and it's literally down to, one last shot like it was tonight, right?
yeah,
Where Trae Young, gets the Hawks back in the game, hits the game winner, right? I mean, you don't want a situation like that if you're Boston, right? Because I mean,
right.
this team just went to the finals. You don't want to really struggle in a first round series against a team that, in my opinion, isn't even in your class. But again, shout out to the Hawks. They played really well. They did a lot better, I think, than most of us thought. I thought this would probably be a 5-game series. I don't usually pick teams to sweep because I just think in general in the modern NBA it's really hard to sweep a team
Yeah,
just because there could always be that one game where a team is down 3-0 and then they just have a game where they just can't miss, right?
Exactly.
So I just think so. But either way, right? It's gone further than I thought. But I still think Boston is gonna, win this game. I think that they're gonna be focused. I think they're gonna be locked in, and I think it'll be a much more decisive victory. It wouldn't surprise me if they won, by like double digits.
Yeah,
Just because I think again mentally, they're gonna be locked in. They understand that they gave away this game, and I think they're gonna, pull off a much better performance.
for sure. I agree with that 100%. And now it's almost 2 a.m. for us on the East Coast. We put in an hour of discussion with everyone here. Shout out to everyone who came through. I think this is the most interactive live stream that we've ever done, and we've only done 3, so this is our 3rd one. And, with a lot of teams facing elimination, we'll probably stream again tomorrow, but we got to talk that over and figure out the logistics of things. But, once again, shout out to everyone who came through. It was a great stream, I thought. A lot of great content, a lot of great takes in the chat, a lot of great questions, too, and, we love every single one of you guys. Just to help us out, just hit the like button, subscribe, whatever you feel like doing, just share the video. It could be a comment, whatever. You could even dislike the thing for all that matters. It counts, towards.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't actually dislike that. Please don't. But, yeah, please like and subscribe. And, we're going to have a video out Friday. We're going to record Thursday. Probably some live streams in between, maybe not. But, once again, 2 a.m. for us. We're pretty tired, beat. But thank you all for coming through, and we'll see you next time, man.
Yeah.